I hope you guys are all doing well. We'll wait a couple more minutes. We're a little bit early right now, and then we'll start up the one-on-one lesson. You guys have any questions, feel free to private message us, or you can even, while we're waiting right now, turn on your mic and start talking. All right, so welcome everyone who just joined. We'll be beginning in a couple of minutes once everyone has come. We're excited to go through all the intricacies of Harvard Model Congress 101. Actually, all right, so there still are a couple more people joining. Once they all connect, we will get started. I hope you guys all had a great first day back to school. I'm not sure if that's possible, but hopefully the late start, hopefully you guys enjoyed the late start as much as I did. It's a really good way to get back to school. I don't think I would be ready to start at 8 a.m. All right, so with that, let's get started. So once again, I'm Dylan Chamberlain, and I'm here with Rahul and Evelyn, the two other captains of Harvard Model Congress. We're so excited to do Harvard Model Congress 101 today, and hopefully we'll be able to get through everything by the end. We have made it as condensed as possible. There's a lot of, there's a bit of information that we have to get through, but we're confident that we'll be able to get through it all so that you guys will be ready to be great Harvard Model Congress congressmen or women in the future. So with that, I will hand it off to Evelyn.
Thank you for the intro, Dylan. So for our first topic we wanted to cover is just the basics of the US federal government. So the most important piece of information that you'll need to know, the most foundational piece of US government, is the Constitution. So the Constitution is the foundation of US government, and it dictates the nation. It outlines the abilities that the three branches have: executive, legislative, and judicial, the checks and balances they have on each other, the rights that all US citizens have, and so forth. And it is called the supreme law of the land because of these powerful abilities that it dictates. So the first branch is the executive branch. The executive branch be more well known as the president, but it's also made up of his cabinet and federal agencies or bureaucracies. So the role of the executive branch is to approve or deny bills or propose laws that are created by the legislative branch. And if approved, the executive branch must enforce and execute these laws. Although the president doesn't declare war because Congress does, the president also acts as the commander in chief, which means he or she directs all movements of military forces based on strategies that he or she proposes. And the president also has the ability to appoint things like federal judges, international ambassadors, secretaries of certain departments, and things of that sort. These appointments help the president execute his or her agenda in the manner that they want to push their political agenda. Yeah. And then lastly, the president is in charge of all federal bureaucracies. An example of this is the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA. So the EPA is in charge of all regulations regarding the environment, so they could enforce a law to regulate carbon emissions created by large corporations. So I know this is a lot of information, but the main point is that the executive branch their main role is to enforce and execute laws. The next branch is the judicial branch. So the judicial branch includes all federal courts as well as the Supreme Court. These courts have a vast array of functions. For example, they can judge whether or not a citizen has committed a federal crime. They can resolve conflicts between the citizens and the government, or conflicts between certain branches in the government. But the Supreme Court has a very important power. They are able to execute judicial review. This means that they are able to interpret the Constitution to determine whether or not certain pieces of legislation are constitutional or not, and whether or not certain actions made by the executive branch are constitutional or not. This lends them to the ability to uphold or nullify laws. And the last of the three branches is the legislative branch, which is obviously the branch that we will be focused the most heavily on, because it's Congress, and this is Harvard Model Congress. So the roles of the legislative branch are to write and pass bills, declare war, like I said before, but they're also able to impeach federal officials, including the president, and levy taxes and regulate interstate commerce. So the legislative branch is split into two houses, which is the Senate and the House, and they work together as a bicameral legislature. And they also have checks and balances on each other within Congress, as well as the federal government as a whole. So the three branches of government, as I said before, all of their power derives from the Constitution. So because of this, all the branches must work together to run the nation, meaning that they not only build off of each other's powers, but make sure that they stay in their own limits. These limits are called checks and balances, and were put into place by the founding fathers in the Constitution to ensure that there would be no overpowering branch in the government. So an example of these checks and balances are when the legislative branch creates a bill, they need approval from the executive branch, which is the president, who signs the bill into law. Then the judicial branch can execute its power of judicial review, and if needed, declare the law unconstitutional, which would then nullify the law.
And so the first house of Congress is the House of Reps. And so this is the larger house, where the amount of representatives a state gets is based on state population. And so because of this, the House of Reps supports bigger states as they get more representation. And so they ultimately have more power in the House of Reps. The House of Reps also has a relatively quick election cycle, with representatives getting voted in every 2 years. Now, on the other hand, the Senate is, unlike the House, gives equal representation to the smaller states, with each state's having 2 senators. And so each state will have an equal say in the Senate. Unlike the House, representatives are voted in every 6 years, which gives senators a lot longer within the Senate in order to build better relationships with one another. And this is also, because of that, it's also the smaller house of Congress with only 100 members. Now, in terms of the US legislative process, a bill is introduced. This is basically how a bill works and how it passes through the government in order to become a law. So a bill is introduced by a member of Congress and is assigned to a committee to review. Then the bill goes into each house of Congress, and if it passes both, it'll get sent to the president to either get approved or to be vetoed by the president. If the president signs the bill, it becomes a law. And if he vetoes the bill, Congress can either rework the bill and put it back, or they can overturn the veto with a 2/3 majority and put it into law. And that's pretty much all there is about making bills. So HMC only works in committees. Congress is big. Like, as we mentioned before, there are more than 450 members of the House. So all work will be done in smaller committees, focusing on specific issues. And in order for a bill to go into law, it must be passed or must be approved by the committee. And so it's similar, to give a metaphor, like it's like the MUN General Assembly. We'll never have a full committee with every single member of the General Assembly because it's too big and would be impractical to simulate. So instead, we're going to have smaller committees where everybody can have a chance to speak and share their thoughts. As mentioned before, each person will be assigned to a committee in which there can be several topics which they will have to research and learn about in depth. They will also be assigned a congressperson, and as stated before, they must completely follow their stances and beliefs. For example, assigned to the Committee on Foreign Relations, you could be Ted Cruz. And so you would have to research and act exactly like Ted Cruz would. And we know that Ted Cruz is a relatively controversial figure, but that does not matter in Harvard Model Congress. You have to completely embody his beliefs and his political party's beliefs and his entire ideal system. So for example, during debate, I as Ted Cruz would say, I encourage all members of this committee to vote for this bill because it is imperative that we use American military troops to protect the unalienable freedom of religion. What do you think, Senator Cotton? So as you can see, during debate, I referred to myself as I, and I gave the exact stance that Ted Cruz would have, regardless of what my personal beliefs were. And now so party platforms are like the party ideas and ideals that we will go over in the next slide. Furthermore, keep in mind that this is a bit of an extreme. The two parties do agree on a few things and will sometimes work together. Like in January, they overrode President Trump's veto of the stimulus bill, but for the most part, in our current political landscape, it is very polarized. So this is just an example of issues that Democrats and Republicans are polarized on. So Democrats prefer larger federal government versus Republicans who want more states' rights and a smaller federal government. And Democrats, as you may know, prefer higher taxes and higher federal spending, while Republicans, on the other hand, prefer lower taxes and lower federal spending, et cetera. And so all of this is a generalization and may not necessarily be true, but in most cases it is. And so this is just something to keep in mind. Now, don't worry if you're not fully confident on your topic or who your congressperson is. Before each debate, the captains will make sure to send out a congressional briefing. This, like I said before, is similar to a chair report in MUN, where it would go over the issue as a whole, state possible solutions at hand, and note the different ideological viewpoints and party stances on this issue. And before the debate, we will also have a meeting where the captains will help you research your stance on the issue.
All right, great. Thank you, Rahul. So in an overview, we talked to you about, the US government as a whole and really how it works on a broader stance. Please understand that, the US government's a lot more complicated than that, but that is really all you need to know to understand how the US government works. And instead of focusing on the executive branch or the judicial branch, here at HMC, we'll be focusing on the intricacies of Congress, which is really known as the most powerful branch of the government. It's kind of interesting, at least I think. So then back to like what Rahul said is you'll be assigned a congressperson and you are that congressperson. So during debate, you're no longer, Christian or Gavin or Noah, right? Instead, you're the senator or representative that you've been assigned to. So, right. So like when you talk to your friends during the debate, you would refer to them as their congressional, their congressional delegation and not as their name. And people would refer to you as your congressional delegation. And that's really imperative. And, lastly is the other thing is you need to know what your person stands for. And as that person, what do you want to advocate for, right? You can't be a conservative, a staunchly Republican Donald Trump-like congressional member and be wanting to vote for, pro-immigration and so on, like a socialist agenda, right? So you want to make sure that you are somewhat closely related to your, sorry, someone just texted me. All right, so okay, and then lastly, on the slideshow, I didn't really make this super clear, but the other thing is, you're not 100% tied to the person. The person should act as a role for what you do and kind of vaguely what you do. But then, of course, there is some personal discretion within it, because on the internet, you can't find all the details for exactly, you're not that person and you don't know what that congressperson is thinking. So of course, your own ideologies and personal discretion comes to play to a certain degree, but it always has to be balanced with the three things: that person's ideas, that congressional stance, the person's political party and the political party's platform, and and then lastly, your own discretion. And you can kind of add, your own personal little flair onto it. Great. So now this is where it gets a bit confusing. Like MUN, like debate, there is a procedure how congressional debate works, and HMC tries to mimic as closely as possible real committee debate. So what we're doing in these rooms, what we're doing in our committees is very similar to what the actual congressmen and congresswomen are doing in their own committee room in the Capitol building. So we're trying to mimic it as closely as possible through the format that Harvard has created. So the committee structure is, in each committee, there's around 20 different Congress people, right? And each committee will have a chairperson who directs debate. And during committees, members will debate bills, amend bills, and finally vote to decide whether or not to pass a bill. This is also very indicative of what real congressional debate looks like. And normally the chairperson is like the most senior member or the chosen person to be chair of that committee. Yeah, so then in committee is where Rahul briefly touched on this. This is where the bulk of the congressional work happens, because really no work can get done in the 435 seat hall of the House of Representatives. So instead in committee, this is where people actually do the bulk of the debating, and this is where they actually write bills. So really, I would say it's the most important part of Congress. So then how does it work? You have to follow a whole bunch of steps to even begin debate. This is what I call, the procedural jargon. This stuff is not very interesting. It's not super fun, but it only takes about 5 minutes, and it has to be done in order to start the debate, right? So it's just what, in order to mimic what actually happens in Congress, this is what we have to do. It will look confusing now, but I assure you over time that you guys will, this will become your second nature. It'll be super easy. So how does it look like? In order to start debate, someone has to create a motion to open debate. So before that happens, okay, so before someone motions to open debate, it's literally just 20 different congressmen sitting in a room together, right? There's no debate going on. They're just hanging and chilling out, having a good time. But until one of the Congress people, anyone can do it, raises their placard and says motion to open debate, debate doesn't start. But in order for the debate to actually start and the motion to be agreed to, it has to be seconded by 1/2 of the committee. So what is a second? A second is where other members of the party agree to something, agree to a motion. So if I want to open debate, then 1/2, 10 members have to also agree to it. Normally this is procedural and everyone agrees to enter debate, or there else is really no other reason to be in the committee room, right? If you don't debate. So this almost everyone always seconds to it. That's like not an issue. The next one is motion to set agenda. So once you've decided to start debate, you have to decide what are you going to debate about. As Rahul talked about, the committees are structured around broad topics. There's the U.S. House Committee on Foreign Relations, on military intervention. There are all these specific, there are these actually not specific, pretty broad committees that are in the US that focus on a whole bunch of issues, right? So during debate, they have to decide on which specific issue are they going to tackle within that broad group. This won't really be a big issue here because we'll, for the most part, we'll tell you what the agenda is, like what we're going to debate for that time, because it'll coincide with that congressional briefing that you'll receive. So once again, this is pretty much procedural. Any random congressperson has to do it. Motion to set an agenda, and at least 10 other random congressional persons have to agree to it with a second. Once again, this is procedural. It's almost unanimous every single time. Motion to move into caucus. This is the fun part. So caucuses is where I would say, this is where all the negotiation happens on the table. There are two main types of caucuses, a moderated caucus and an unmoderated caucus. A moderated caucus is a time for members to make short formal comments in front of the committee on the topic of the debate. So if you're aligned in your committee room, if they so choose during a moderated caucus, someone will, whoever is recognized will stand up and give a 30-second comment on the topic, right? If it's about, say, Idaho corn production, then you would give your stance on Idaho corn production. That would be an incredibly boring committee to be in. I would not want to be debating Idaho corn. But the more fun type of caucus is the unmoderated caucus. And this is a time for congressional members to freely work with each other and discuss and talk with each other during debate. There's two types of unmoderated caucus: bipartisan unmoderated caucus and partisan unmoderated caucus. Bipartisan unmoderated caucus is where congressional members can talk and work with anyone they so choose, right? So if you're in the giant room of 20 people, you can work with anyone casually, right? That's the key word. Unmoderated caucus is casual, and you can discuss like, hey, Senator Feinstein, what do you think about this part of the bill? Yo, do you want to go? Don't say yo. Senator, do you want to work together and fight to take down this amendment from the bill, right? And these, that's the, oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. So that's the other, that's where all of the unofficial work happens, but this is where people can have like a one-on-one connection with each other and actually discuss what they want to do casually. The two types of unmoderated caucus is bipartisan and partisan. Bipartisan means that anyone can talk with anyone they want across. A Republican can work with a Democrat, an independent can work with a Democrat. That's completely fine. But a partisan unmoderated caucus is where people can only work with members of their party. So only the Republicans can talk with other Republicans and only Democrats can talk with other Democrats. This is less common, and normally bipartisan is the preferred one in HMC, so everyone can hear each other's ideas and work together. So those are the two types of caucuses. When you motion to move into a caucus, whoever is the motioner has to specifically state what type of caucus, what type of the caucus, and the duration of the caucus. So for example, I might say motion to move into a bipartisan unmoderated caucus for 20 minutes. And then the rest of the members have to agree whether they want to do that or they don't want to do that. If they don't want to do it, they second. If they want to do it, they second it. If they don't want to do it, they don't. And then of course, it needs one half to get agreed to and actually happen. Therefore, let's say, I say something ridiculous. I want a partisan unmoderated caucus for 10 hours. Then obviously people are not going to second to it, and it's going to fail, and someone else will caucus. Once again, it's the delegates' choices on whether or not they want to have a caucus, but normally people will have a, will normally have a 10-ish minute, 5-ish minute unmoderated caucus before the debate starts, so they can kind of have an idea what other people are doing and what other people, feel, to get kind of a sense of the room. Later on, when we talk to you about bill writing, unmoderated caucuses or even partisan are really commonly used are really commonly used to actually do the bill writing. So that's where you would work with your other senators or representatives to write the bills, which is the proposed laws. Great. So moving on to the actual debate. Once you guys have written a bill, and once again, don't be scared when we say the word bill, it's just a proposed law. And don't worry, you guys won't have to write those right now. We will provide you with the bills because bill writing we'll get into later on in the year before we actually go to the Harvard conference. So you guys will know how to write bills later, but for the sake of simplicity, we're not going to go into it right now because it's somewhat monotonous. So when there's a bill, which we'll give to you, the author of the bill has to motion to introduce a bill. And it's the same way it works for all the other motions. Whoever wants to make the motion interjects at an appropriate time and shouts out motion to introduce bill. If the committee wants to hear this bill, then at least one half of them will second to it or agree to it. Once again, this is normally a formality. Usually in HMC, every single bill will be debated if time permits. So very rarely do you reject hearing a bill because there's really no harm in debating it. If it's bad, then you can reject it and not pass it later on. Once the bill has been introduced, then the chair will read out the bill, only the operative clauses, and each member will receive a copy of the bill. Then the author will give a speech, which he will, explaining the bill and encouraging members to vote on the bill. HMC is lucky that the committee can choose the time of the authorship of the speeches. So it's not set in stone. It's first set by the chair, but later on in the debate, hey, we want more time to debate. Hey, we want less time to debate. You can always make a motion to change the speaking time, which we'll talk about later. So the author will give their speech. After the author has given their speech, they'll move into pro-con speeches that are for the bill, speeches that are not for the bill. In order to start these speeches, there needs to be something called a pro-con speaker list. And this is simply, it sounds confusing, but this is simply where the chair will write on a Google document who is for the bill, who is against the bill, and who wants to speak about it, who wants to give speeches. It is just a formality. It takes literally 1 second to do. So after the author gives the speech, the chair will ask, pro-con speaker list, who wants to be on this? Then you'll go through that, and then you'll give speeches. And then it'll alternate between pro and con speeches. People speak for the bill, then people speak against, and then for, and then against, and for and against, so on. At any time you want to amend or change specific parts of the bill, you can move to a motion to amend. An amendment is literally just a change to the bill. I don't like this word, I want to scratch it out. I want to add this part into the bill. I want to replace this word. I want to replace this part. Amendments there's literally free range. It can either be a replacement, a addition, or a strike. It can be as simple as striking one word or striking multiple clauses, and then the same for the other types. So it's literally up to you guys. And then once again, you write these amendments by yourself or during caucuses. So if you see a bill and you're like, I don't really like this part, in the middle of the debate at an appropriate time, you can go ahead and make a motion to move into an unmoderated caucus to write the bill. Sorry, not to write the bill, write the amendment, right? And then after that time elapses, then you can have the motion to amend. And then the motion to amend works the exact same way as all the other motions work. If it's during a bill, someone at a appropriate time stands up, motion to amend. If it's a seconded or agreed to by one half of the committee, which is once again just a formality, it normally always is, then there's two types. Then they'll move into the amendment debate procedure. The friendly amendments is an abnormality. This is just when all signatories of the bill agree to the amendment and it just automatically agreed to and put into the bill. That's it. Nothing changes. Now there's just slight changes to the amendment, slight changes to the bill, and everyone debates thereon forward with those changes. But the normal kind is an unfriendly amendment, when the signatories or the authors of the bill don't agree to it and don't want it. In that case, it literally just repeats this part. It's the same process, but on a smaller amendment scale. There'll be pro-con speeches, and then and then you have to move into motion to previous question. This part is confusing. It just is. Like, Congress is old. The rules were written a while ago, but you'll understand it later on. We'll walk you through this. There'll be examples. So the last part is motion to move to previous question. This happens at the end of debate. If debate's dying down, people don't want to give speeches anymore, you move into a motion to previous question. And while it's a weird name, all it means is that we are done debating. Let's vote on this bill. Let's see if it will pass. That's all it means. So then, once debate's dying down, I could be motion to move to previous question. And that's saying, I just want to end debate. If that happens, in order for it to pass, it requires 2/3 of the committee to agree or to second to it. 2/3 is a larger threshold, although when you vote to move to previous question, this does not mean in any way that you support or you're against the bill. It simply means I'm done debating this. I want to move into voting now. That's all it means. So you can motion move to previous question if you hate it, motion move to previous question if you like it. And then once that happens, then you'll move to vote, right? Do we want to have this amendment or do we not want to have this amendment in the bill? That's it. Okay, so this process goes on indefinitely. It's just a continuous process of pro-con speeches and amendments. The amendments is a subtangent to the actual debate. But once the debate is over, then you move into a motion to previous question, but instead of for the amendment, is for the entire bill. We are done debating this bill. Let's move on to voting. That's it. It's the same process. It requires 2/3 of the committee to agree, and then you move into voting procedure for the bill as a whole, which just requires a simple majority to pass the bill and move on and move it on. So that is very, very confusing, but it will make sense later, trust me. So the last part, Okay, so the last part is what happens after the speech. As I said before, the debate times or durations of the speech is variable depending on what the chair chooses. So at the start of the debate, the chair will choose, maybe it's normally like 60 to 90 seconds, but it could be, this chair has set 60 seconds per speech as a debate time, right? But not everyone's speech will fill up that amount of time. It doesn't have to. So whenever you finish your speech, the chair will ask you, how do you wish to yield? Actually, there should be a slide. Okay, how do you wish to yield? There are 3 options. You can yield to questions, yield to another speaker, or yield back to the chair. All this means is that the chair is asking you, what do you want to do with your remaining time? You had 90 seconds, you only used 30 seconds. What do you want to do with the rest? Yield to questions means that I want to use the rest of my questions and answer the rest of my time and answer questions from the rest of the committee. So I allow other senators, other representatives to ask me questions on my speech. Yield to another speaker just means, you know what? I want to give my time to another person. Instead, Evelyn can use the remaining 60 seconds that was allotted to me and give her own speech. And then yield back to the chair just means I'm done. I'm out of here. I want to go sit down. I don't care about the rest of my time. You can have it. So that's yielding back to the chair. Are there any questions about this? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, someone wanna go? Does someone else wanna go?
No, I think
so
you
it's
can go,
me.
bud.
All right. So I suppose most of the people here are from MUN, perhaps even all. It's kind of funny when you say after carefully selection when you send everyone an email. But anyway, I was wondering, what is the main difference between the Harvard Model Congress and MUN? Like the procedure, it sounds very similar. It's just like instead of we're debating a resolution instead of a bill, and also their amendments and stuff. Like what would you clarify as the main difference?
Yeah, so there is, okay, sorry. Wait, let me admit some people from the waiting room. Give me a minute. Okay, yeah, so there are, okay, so, okay, so the two, you're right. The process is rather similar, but the very reason is because the United Nations was modeled after Congress. The United Nations was created in 1945 and Congress was made in 1786, right? So actually, United Nations was modeled after Congress and they follow a lot of the same structure that the US does. So go Team USA. But in terms of the different clubs, what we actually do is we are focusing on American issues here, and we are representing actual American representatives and not people, not specific nations, right? So instead, you would represent this city in the United States and not an entire country. And instead of doing like global issues, you're doing specific American issues. That are very topical and very in the news. But also, on a more fundamental issue, the differences between is Harvard Model Congress, the structures of HMC is it allows a lot more, collaboration and communication between people. So while all of this jargon might make it sound very, disconnected from the people, it really allows for people to work closely together and actually have more casual, open debate where they can clash on idealistic issues rather than the super, I hope my fellow MUN other officers are not here other than Rahul, but, it's a lot less stuck up than MUN, and it really allows people to give out their ideas and really just talk about how they feel about an issue. So there's less stuck upness in the diplomacy and the thank you for your fine speech, delegate. HMC kind of
Like
remove that.
more casual? Would you?
It
or
is
like
a
you
bit
use
more
personal
casual,
pronouns, right?
aside from all of this jargon that you have to do in the beginning.
I have another quick question about the name. It says Harvard Model Congress, right? Does it got anything to do with the Harvard or like Harvard University, or like why is it called this name?
Exactly. Yeah, it is. We are a subsect of the Harvard Model Congress, which is a organization based in the Harvard University. The organization itself is run by Harvard students and Harvard professors. And how it's all connected is this is their structure that they've created. They've modified committee debates into something that can be done by SAS students. And also in December, there will be an international Harvard College conference where you guys can do HMC, but with other international students led by Harvard students. So Harvard students would chair each committee room. They would coach you through the process and actually on an international stage participate in HMC through the Harvard College.
All right, thanks.
Great. So back to parliamentary procedure. There are two other things we have to go over is point of information and points of parliamentary inquiries. You might have heard these words in MUN. They're a little bit different in Harvard Model Congress. The points of information don't go to the speaker like they do in Model United Nations. Instead, the points of information are questions to clarify substantive matters to the chair. So if you're confused, you're like, Chair, what are you talking about? Why is there actually 8,000 soldiers in Somalia? How is that military platform working? Right. So if you have actual questions about information and content, that goes to the chair in a point of information. And point of information you can ask at any time throughout the debate, as long as it's appropriate. So as long as it's after someone's speech, And points of parliamentary inquiry are literally the same thing. You can even call these points of information if you so desire. And you ask the chair a question about procedural matters, right? We get it. There's a lot of jargon. You could ask point of parliamentary inquiry, what is the next motion we have to pass to move on to debate, right? Something like that, just about how do you get through all this jargon. Points of information don't go to the speaker. When you can ask questions to the speaker after they've yielded their time to questions. So yeah, it's just a technical difference. Okay, so we get it. It's a bit confusing, but we'll quickly go through an example debate so that you guys have a better understanding of how this looks in actual committee debate. Myself and the captains are going to show you a little bit of what HMC looks like. Before that, actually, are there any more questions? Oh, not like that. Are there any more questions?
So just to clarify, the mock debate will be sent as a video after the meeting. So just look out for that after the meeting. So in an email, that'll probably come relatively soon.
Okay.
Yeah. So are there any questions of what's covered so far?
Pardon?
Are there any questions out of what's covered so far? We went through a lot of stuff, and so.
Okay. And then once again, we'll put this will be on our website. There are, we'll send you out our website. This video will be on the website. There's also a brilliant article written by Harvard on going through all this procedural stuff. So you guys will be able to read that later on. So you guys, we'll put this video there. You'll have that article. And then, of course, you can always send us a text message. You can always send us an email. We are, or at least mine, a huge, HMC nerd. So, we would love to answer any of your questions. And with that, we will be moving into our, we'll be moving on to our example debate.
The example debate will be recorded and sent after the meeting. We're not going to do it right now. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Forgot about that. With that, we will leave this into any questions. Do you guys have anything? Sorry, I didn't seem to read my text message. This is don't worry about bill writing. We'll teach you about that later. Just to streamline the debate process. We don't want to get caught up in that. And then upcoming timeline, we will have this is our lesson meeting on the October 18th. We have our debate prep meeting on October 25th. We'll send you details about that very soon. And then we'll have our first mock debate on November 1st. So yeah, so we look forward to see you guys on October 25th when we will, help you through the entire process. We will walk you through the entire process. We'll help you do the research. We'll help you understand your platform and the topic. And then November 1st, we'll actually do the debating. So if you have any questions, stay back. This video will be on the website. And thank you for coming.